Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Breaking into Cybersecurity. I'm Marc Davis with Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp. And with me, as always, I've got Corey Greenwald, also from Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp. Hey, Corey.
Hey, Marc. How's it going?
Good, good. We have yet another cool topic to talk about today, don't we, Corey?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited, actually. So today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different, right? Like we've spoken to a CISO already, really like up the chain, right? But we really, most of our graduates from here end up in either entry or mid-level roles in something called a security analyst role. And so what we want to do today is really dive in and explore what does a typical day in the life of a security analyst look like. So that's what we're going to be focused on today. It's one of the most common entry-level roles in cybersecurity, and it's also one of the most common roles that we see from our graduates. So really excited about sort of the guests that we'll be bringing on today.
If only we knew someone who really knew about the role of security analysts. There must be someone.
We might as well just cancel the episode. That's it.
You know what? I got a guy. Yeah. I got a guy. Marc Capellupo. Marc, so glad you could join us at the last minute.
Corey, Marc, thanks for having me.
Welcome,
Marc, you are a security architect at Exabeam.
Correct.
And a fun fact about you is you are also a part-time instructor at Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp.
Yep. Happy to be on the team. Happy to work with you guys, and happy to lead the charge on the next group of cybersecurity professionals.
Look, you can tell us the truth, Marc. We're like live on camera here. You can just like say what you want. You don't need to. Everyone can hear it. So your thoughts.
Hey, those are opinions that I echo on and off the camera.
Well, and Marc, whether that's true or not, you actually help train the next generation of security analysts, don't you?
Correct. Yeah.
Well, we're going to be diving into that, right? But before we do, for anybody who doesn't know your work, just tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up getting into cybersecurity.
Yeah. So my journey through cybersecurity was actually a bit of a long and I'll say bumpy journey, not so much because of the field, but a little bit more from my side of things. So I actually started, I knew I always wanted to do computers, right? I loved video games, right? I really liked The Matrix. So I was really into computers. I knew I wanted to do something with computers, right? And at the time, web development was the hot thing to do. So I figured, all right, we'll do web development, right? We'll learn programming. It wasn't something that I was learning at school, right? I went to Queens College for my bachelor's in computer science, but didn't really teach you web development or anything like that, how to program in JavaScript to CSS. So I took that off myself. I took that, I learned it, but I wasn't thrilled with it. I wasn't super happy in the role. I had a few positions, and to be honest, it felt like I was building toys. I wasn't really solving real world problems. And to be honest, it took me a long time to finish my undergrad, right? It took me about 6 years to finish that undergrad. My grades weren't great, but the one thing that I was really passionate about was security. I said, all right, I don't really want to do this, right? I don't really want to do the web development. So I started to shift over towards security, right? I mean, if you Google how to hack Facebook or something like that, you get a lot of nonsense topics, a lot of crazy things and videos on the internet, things like that. But I really wanted to take it that next level, right? Whether it was just that mentality of like, how do you get around things, right? Like I took the LIRR pretty much every day. And it was a puzzle to me how they always knew how to come through the train and get the tickets, right? It was a puzzle like, all right, not necessarily to game it illegally, but is this something like if I get off at this stop, right, could I potentially get on without a ticket, right? And just that mentality of like, could you work around these things, right? And naturally, I always had that sort of instinct. So I moved into my first cybersecurity role. It's an industry that I was fortunate enough to pivot into, just having the experience from a software engineering background, a web development background. I was able to move into that cybersecurity role, right, as an analyst. That was actually where I got my start. Shortly after that, I moved into a SIM engineer role, and everything sort of snowballed from there. So I got my master's degree in cybersecurity from Fordham. I moved to this Silicon Valley startup in Exabeam.
Right.
Where I was on professional services originally. I got to travel the world doing all sorts of cool different things, deploying these security solutions in companies in Italy and Singapore. So a lot of cool stuff that snowballed to where I am now at Exabeam, where I'm a security architect, where I talk to, it's the best of both worlds for me. I get to talk to the C-level suite, the people at the very top. What are their security concerns? Propose a solution, build out a solution, then talk to the people that are actually hands-on keyboard, the frontline warriors, the analysts,
right?
And bridge that gap. So it's been a long journey, but especially in cybersecurity, it just sort of snowballs, and I've had a very fortunate career.
Awesome. Marc, I love that you brought up this sort of I feel like I'm going to keep saying Marc, and you're not going to know who I'm talking to here. But I'm talking to Marc with the C right now, so Marc C, if you will. But you brought up this sort of idea that you would think sort of like, what are the weaknesses when I would travel this train, right? Like when I would take this, is like, could I get a free ticket? You're not going to do it. You're not going to go out of your way to do it. But you think about it, and this is sort of what we call ethical hacking, right? Sort of like thinking about these weaknesses in a system and putting your sort of cyber hat on and figuring how can I be on the other side protecting these systems. In this case, it might just be a free trip on a train ride, but in some cases it could be all of our personal data. And so those are the people that, if you've always had that curiosity, you've thought about, can I use this coupon twice? Can I do this thing again? It's like, you're somebody who has that itch for sure about thinking about like, what can I do in this industry? So I really like that you brought that up. You mentioned Exabeam a little bit. Specifically though, I'm curious, like what exactly does Exabeam do? And like, what is sort of their role in the cyberspace?
Sure. So we're actually, we're a security vendor, right? We build security solutions for different companies, and we actually fall into several different markets. To not sound too cheesy, we're trying to make the lives of analysts and security teams easier. But as far as the actual offerings, it falls into several different market segments. One is actually a full SIM market segment. So to largely categorize it, we have that collection piece. We have our brains on top of this. But we also have other offerings, so connectors that can go out and pull logs from the cloud, right? Do this logging, do this compliance and audit reporting. We have SOAR tools as well, but I would say the real bread and butter of what Exabeam does and where we actually started is our behavioral analytics. So a lot of people know Exabeam for our behavioral analytics tool. And essentially what that is, it's actually quite interesting, and what brought me to the company in the first place is when you're looking at these logs, right? This log belongs to Corey, this log belongs to Marc. We're tracking all these different behavioral patterns to say, okay, here are the PCs that Marc logs into, right? Here are the PCs that Corey logs into. And when people start to step outside that, hey, you've never logged into this before. Hey, you've never come in and VPN'd in from this IP address before. That's when we'll flag this activity. We'll add risk points. We'll bubble these people up. And so you're investigating anomalous activity, which is how you're able to track a lot better, avoid some false positives, be able to actually do a more cohesive investigation as opposed to just saying, hey, Corey logged into this machine, you should go and check it out.
So let me just say this for our listeners here who might not know. You might not realize this as you're watching this on your work computer right now, but there's a good chance that your computer is generating logs for everything that you do, and your company has the ability to watch those, track those, not only to be spying on you, but to make sure that their systems are secure, right? Because people on the inside have the most access, and so it's really important that that person doesn't get compromised. So when Marc's talking about logs here, he's really diving into this idea that these events that you're doing on your computer are being captured. And that's kind of what Marc's talking about here when he's saying Exabeam is something, this is what they focus on.
And I think, when you look at Corey's log files in particular, I think we all know Corey logs into some pretty sketchy stuff. So that's how you catch people like Corey. Am I right, Marc?
Absolutely. You got to look at the web traffic, the categories to go to, how many hits on social media. Exactly that.
That's right. Busted.
Corey, you have a pretty high score in Exabeam.
I'm scared.
So you got that going for you. All right. So Marc, you talked about a SIM. Some of our viewers may not even know what a SIM is. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into tools used by security analysts. But let's just start with a bird's eye view. What is a security analyst? yeah, what is a security analyst?
Yeah, great question. And I'll say in short, it's my most cohesive wrap around what a security analyst is a cyber detective, right? So to Corey's point, machines have gotten pretty good at this point of keeping an audit trail of everything they do, right? So when somebody logs into it, keeping a record of this, keeping a log of this transaction, right? Somebody running a process, spinning up Microsoft Word or running Chrome or anything like that. We've gotten pretty good at actually, one, auditing that activity, and then two, is the security industry, right? Collecting that into a central point. Problem is, when you're looking at an enterprise environment, you're talking about I would say on average, about 5 to 15,000 logs and events per second into these tools, right?
Per second.
Yeah, per second, right? Count to 15,000 per second. Some organizations, some really, Fortune 100 organizations have as much as like 150,000 logs generated per second, right? So I mentioned that to preface what a security analyst is. It's digging through that, right? It's being the cyber detective. There's so many transactions and activities going on the network that we need people to be able to be on the front lines to be able to investigate this stuff. And typically, of all that activity, all that traffic that's being generated, right? We've built out tools, whether it be Exabeam, whether it be other SIM vendors, whether it be antivirus vendors. We've gotten pretty good at tracking some of these activities to be able to say, yeah, this is something that you should investigate, right? But we still need people to actually do that investigation. So we still need people on the front lines. When we see a tool that says, hey, this is this person logged into this machine, you should check it out. This person is coming in from an IP address that is known to be bad, right? Think of it like this. It's to continue that analogy of a detective, right? It's imagine a detective finding a door that's unlocked, right? And then having to determine if a crime occurred. There's a million different reasons that door could be unlocked, right? Somebody forgot their keys, somebody left the door open, they were just running out into the front yard, right? And then having to investigate every single time a door is unlocked, right? This is the role of an analyst. We know that an unlocked door is evidence of somebody potentially breaking into your house, but we still need people to be able to piece together, okay, that door is unlocked. What else should I look for? Maybe footprints, right? Maybe it's a rainy day and there's mud leading up to the door, right? Maybe the lock was broken. And so all these different things, this is the job of the security analyst to take these pieces of rules and alerts that have generated in a particular environment and then be able to take that further. So not only a detective, but a police officer, right? Investigating if a crime has occurred in the first place. And then like a 911 operator to actually triage all those different alerts and calls that come in. It is quite a broad skill set. And all things considered, as you said before, Corey, this is typically the first step in a cybersecurity journey.
Right. Yeah. And, as you mentioned, I mean, 15,000 logs per second. I mean, that number sounds big to a lot of us, but you got to imagine that like 99.9% of that information is just noise, right? Like most of the time it's just noise, and filtering through that noise is really tough. I think that leads into kind of the next thing that I want to discuss here is like, with all this information, with this detective work that you do, I don't know why I put that in quotes. It is detective work. But with all this stuff that you do, what is it, you show up at your job, I don't know, 10 a.m. or something like that. It's a 24-hour job, but let's say you start at, 10 a.m. What does your typical day look like, right? Like, what do you what is it like to be a detective on the job as a security analyst? Can you take us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's typically when you come in 9 a.m, you'll have a list of alerts that, depending on whether you're 24/7, whether you're handing off from another team, right? Typically, it's coming in and looking at those alerts. So as I said before, vendors and security researchers have built out these things to look at these logs, right? The correlation rules, in Exabeam's case, the behavior analytics, in EDR's case or CrowdStrike's case, the alerts from the point. it's taking all these different alerts, potential indicators of a much larger security incident, right? And being the detective to be able to say, okay, yeah, this is something that we need to dig further into. That could be a hack, right? Or saying, yeah, this is something that's okay. They left their door unlocked intentionally, right? It's something we can ignore. So it starts with triaging those alerts, right? And typically where you'll see that is either like a ticketing system, a SIM tool. It's logging in, seeing these alerts, doing that triage to say, okay, here's where we're starting, right? We want to go with the high severity ones. Hey, somebody unlocked the door and actually the door lock is broken, kind of thing. And so as far as what a day-to-day looks like, that's probably the core theme, is responding to those alerts, right?
Got it. So just to clarify here, you just mentioned this priority system is good, right? Like a door being opened bad, but a door being open and the lock is busted is worse, right? So that would be a worse kind of alert that comes in. So this alert comes into the system. You're showing up. You're like, oh my god, I got this alert. What does your deep dive start to look like there, right? Well, how do you handle when the door is open and the lock is broken? What is your sort of process from there?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because this is where it actually gets really tricky, and this is where that response varies widely between organizations and actually individual analysts, right? You have to put on that hat that says, okay, well, what is the next piece of information I should look for, right? The attacks. You look at any incident response or any postmortem threat report, right? Any post-incident report, anything like that, you'll see there's stages, right? It started here, they moved here, they tried to do this, it didn't work, then they tried to do this. If all you have is that one breadcrumb, right? You have to figure out the rest of that picture. So if all you have is a breadcrumb that says that door is unlocked, right? Now you have to go and piece together, okay, well, what else? Ask yourself these questions, right? What else was happening on this machine, right? What else was happening with this user account? What else was happening nearby? And to what I was saying before, is this varies widely between analysts, because that's the key skill set of the analyst, is to be able to come to this decision to say, okay, yeah, here's what I should be looking for, right? Put on to what we were talking about before about the train, right? This is right. How can I get around this? What's the next step an attacker would take, right? What is the next breadcrumb I should look for? And that's when you'd have to go into SIM tool, start digging through that pile of logs to be able to figure out the full story. So it's following breadcrumb to breadcrumb, going down these rabbit holes, looking through these logs and being able to come to that bigger picture of what actually happened.
So for those who don't know, what is a SIM?
Yeah, great question. So I'll start with the problem of what we were having, and naturally where SIM became that solution. We had all of these logs, right? We're an enterprise environment. We have all of these logs generating on all of these different PCs, right? 15,000 different laptops, workstations, right? And they're doing a good job of generating these logs, but they're isolated, right? And so imagine if I think Corey has moved to another machine, I can log into Corey's laptop and look through his logs and say, okay, here's what he did. But if I think he moved, to another machine, right? Or I also want to figure out what his web activity is, I'd have to now log into that other machine to go through the logs. I'd have to log into the proxy to figure out Corey's web activity. And so they were typically isolated. They were siloed. All of the different breadcrumbs that I was talking about before were siloed into different places around the network. The SIM was naturally born. Well, why not put all of these into a central spot, right? Why not give us a Google search bar for all these logs, right? And so I can be able to go into the SIM. I can be able to say, hey, show me logs where user equals Corey, right? And whether it's proxy, whether it's the workstation, whether it's the laptop, whether it's firewall, right? Whatever it is, be able to actually piece these together without having to log into each of these silos to figure it out.
All right. So now we have a sense for what a security analyst does, a day in the life, right? It's about triaging alerts, prioritizing them, working in a SIM to try and make sense out of all this noise coming through from log files. Now, where are they doing this work? We often talk in security about something called a security operations center. So what is a security operations center in the first place?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. The security operations, right, SOC, which I know is a funny thing to say to people who are not familiar with the industry, right? I work in a SOC. You work in a shoe as well, but right, security operations center. Hey, you didn't start with the improv stand-up like I was expecting. Right?
Okay, all right.
We didn't tell you we were going to rate your jokes. Yeah.
Well,
That's a solid four.
Solid.
You know what? Like the video if you guys like the joke. But it's interesting, right? What is a SOC? And it's always an eye-opening moment for people who have never been into the actual physical location of a SOC before. So from a high-level standpoint, this is where the magic happens, right? This is where all of the analysts, all of the frontline workers are all sitting together, right, to review this activity. As far as the physical environment, it's actually quite cool. There's rows and rows, and this is for the larger organizations, right, that have the security budget to be able to build out this full security operations center. Rows and rows of computer desks, not too far off from what you would see in like a space shuttle launch center.
That's
right?
what I was thinking, yeah.
TVs on the wall, the different alerts that are triggering, the different dashboards, right? I know when I was working on the weekends, at least one of those TVs had Saturday morning cartoons. But, the different alerts that are coming in, the different dashboards, the different pieces that you're looking at. And to be honest, as I said, it's the war room of the security team. This is where the magic happens. This is where they're all sitting together, working amongst each other. Hey, I don't really understand this. Can you take a look at it? Can you take a second set of eyes at it? Right? Crunch that stuff together, and that's escalate that to the larger people and where this investigation can all happen in one spot.
Right. So it's sort of the central, like you mentioned, centralized war room of these analysts and anyone else, maybe the higher level security team members as well. Of course, if anything needs to be escalated, that's really good. So you mentioned like sort of the I don't know, I'm thinking of like a chef in the kitchen or something, like if the main cutting knife or something. I'm clearly not a chef myself. If the whatever you want to call it, yeah, it's a knife. It's a knife. Yeah, like if the main knife or the main tool for the chef is their cutting knife, then that's the SIM, right? But what other tools you might find analysts using on a day-to-day basis, right? Like what else sort of is needed for them, doing their day-to-day job? What kinds of things maybe they need to be good with to kind of excel in these roles? So that's the next thing I'm really curious about here.
Yeah, great question. To your point, the SIM is largely the spine of all this, but that's not where it happens.
Spine
that's not where everything happens. The entire investigation takes place, but it is a big part of that. Doing that searching, being able to look through all these logs through that SIM. But you're all right. There is a lot of stuff that happens outside of that. So typically, I'll walk you through a scenario to give you a good idea. Typically, we'll take a phishing incident, right? What would you do with a phishing incident? Well, think of what you do at home when you see an email that looks suspicious, right? And some of you may already be on this, right? Some of you may already be up to this point, but how would you actually determine if this is something that's malicious or not? Well, first off is, okay, well, who sent this to me, right? What domain is this coming from? Do I recognize the domain? And so to take that further for the security analyst, looking at a domain and doing this threat intel investigation on it. So you'll see a lot of open source tools online, things like VirusTotal, right? Things like MX Toolbox, right? Things like IBM's Xforce as well, that are open source threat intel feeds to say, hey, give me a domain, give me an IP address, right? And I'll tell you if I've ever seen anything bad on it, right? Other people have seen malicious things coming from this IP. I'll keep it in my library. Think of it as a giant library of bad actors, bad IP addresses, bad domains, and things like that. So referencing the larger community of, is this IP address bad? You also see that with hashes, right? For files that may be malicious. Take a file like imagine that phishing email had a file attached to it. Well, should I click it or shouldn't I click it? The answer is probably no, right? But how do I actually know what this file would have done, right? How do I know for certain if it's malicious? You'll hear other things called sandboxes, right? So you take a file, you upload it to this completely isolated machine. open that file and then see what happens, right? See the different pieces that it starts poking, right? Spin it up in a isolated sandbox and see what it tries to run. See what IP addresses it tries to connect out to, right? And so doing a deeper investigation that way, and then also to the internal tools as well. So referencing firewalls, right? Referencing the proxies where all of the web traffic routes through. Doing the investigation that way. There's many different tools, many different sort of piecemeal solutions that security vendors have come up with, right? I'll give you another example is endpoint detection response, EDR. So if you look into companies like CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, right, SentinelOne, these different companies are actually logging on the endpoint and being able to do different alerts from there as well. So logging into a tool like that, a tool like Tanium, to be able to say, okay, well, this alert, this IP address, has anybody else been going to this IP address, right? Have I seen this file that came in this phishing email? Have I seen it anywhere else on the network? Have I seen it anywhere else with all my other machines, right? So a lot of different tools, right? A lot of different places to do the investigation, and largely because it came out of this need, right? We're sort of doing, all of us, the security community is sort of doing this on the fly, right? We're saying, well, wouldn't it be great if I could take this file and know for sure if it was actually malicious, right? So lo and behold, the sandbox was born. We blew it up in the sandbox, and you'll see a lot of different tools like that.
So this is interesting, and I think I want to clarify something for some of the people who are listening who are just thinking about getting into this. So Marc mentioned this thing called a phishing email, right? Like what really is that, right? Like so think of it as sort of an email. You've definitely seen these before that come in and it looks a little suspicious, right? Maybe it's Facebook trying to prompt you to change your password or something, but it doesn't quite look right, right? So Marc saying, hey, did you check the who it actually came from? What domain was that email attached to? Was it attached to oogabooga.com instead of facebook.com? Is there anything that we know about oogabooga.com, right? Is oogabooga.com associated with Facebook? I made up this website, obviously. I don't know. Like we're not, Fullstack is not associated with oogabooga.com. We do not consent to whatever oogabooga.com is. But
may or may not do.
May or may not do. I don't even know. I'm afraid now. Just like citing random email addresses. But, with all this being said, Marc then goes, right, and you check out oogabooga.com. Does anyone in the security community ever hear of this thing? Is it a trusted, vendor for Facebook who maybe sends these emails on Facebook's behalf? Let's find out whatever kind of information. And then maybe there's a file attached, as Marc pointed out, and that file can be sort of malicious. So you wouldn't want to download that or open that on a machine where, it's connected to all these other machines. Let's instead sort of this idea of a sandbox. Let's like create a machine or have a machine that's completely not attached to the network, not related to these other machines, and open it over there, right? So that if there is something bad about this file, if there is something that we don't want, at least we're not opening it on our network, on our machines, and causing something to happen. So these are sort of the different things that it sounds like you're going through, and obviously it's way more complex than that, but it's so many cool sort of strategies of dealing with the day-to-day things. And when you're dealing with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, I'm sure this happens a lot, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit on it. It's there's a million different routes that you could take that, right? So there's a million different ways that you can go through this and say, all right, well, what else is going on, right? Well, wouldn't it be great if I could actually log into that website and see what was going on? Wouldn't it be great if I could see who owns this domain that sent me this email? And so every question, right? This is in essence what the, why it's such an open-ended career, and why some of the questions you're asking. I can tell you what I see other enterprises doing. I can tell you what will help answer some of those questions. But when you actually look at a security analyst, your greatest power is asking questions, right? What happened before? What happened after, right? Asking the right questions. So it's the same way a detective sees that door unlocked and doesn't say, well, okay, it was unlocked, but nothing was robbed. Well, maybe they are inside and maybe they're hiding in the closet. Maybe I should check for footprints, right? Maybe I should check for a broken window as well. Maybe I should check the back door, right? And so all these different pieces, all these different questions you can ask to get back to your ultimate question of what tools do security analysts use, it's to answer those different questions.
And the threat landscape is changing literally every day. I mean, Corey, you were just talking about phishing. That's one attack vector out of dozens, hundreds of attack vectors that are changing all the time. So as a security analyst, not only do you need to know a wide suite of tools, but you need to constantly be learning new tools, right?
Exactly. And even now, one of the things I didn't touch on was where we're seeing the market go is to SOAR, right? So security, orchestration, automation, and response. In essence, has this lovely name, but in essence, it's automating a lot of those steps. So I take an IP address, I click send, and it'll actually scan it against VirusTotal. It'll blow that file up into Sandbox, right? It'll run this, playbook, if you will, this incident response playbook on this phishing email, on whatever it is, this alert that came in, so that you're doing a consistent set of steps. And so this is naturally where we're starting to see. And again, why I would say we're figuring this out on the fly, because we start with logs and we say, great, we'll put them in a SIM tool. Okay, well, there's 15,000 of them. Are you going to do that? All right, well, we need something to actually find the bad guys in this. All right, well, let's alert on this. Now we have too many alerts, right? Now we have thousands of alerts a day. I can't go through all that. All right, well, let's do something like behavior analytics. Okay, well, I'm still investigating and I'm still doing a manual process for my phishing emails. All right, well, let's build you out a SOAR tool to do this automatically for you. So we're constantly, to your point, Mark, we're constantly evolving the threat landscape. We're constantly snowballing and constantly trying to keep up and push the bar to ultimately be able to make it much easier for the analysts and much easier for security teams to see that big picture and identify these things before they happen.
So you mentioned behavioral analytics, right? Is that powered by machine learning, artificial intelligence? Are you using these sorts of tools to try and filter through the noise?
Absolutely. And it's you're 100% right. And to my point I was saying before, we're starting to see, as machine learning grows, we say, hey, why not apply that to security? Right. And that's exactly what we're doing with behavioral analytics. We're saying, okay, well, let's take a user and then let's apply some machine learning. Let's take their past activity and do some analysis on that and say, all right, well, this is kind of far outside from their normal, right? You take something like logging in from a new country, right? Which is something, hey, I've seen you consistently, this machine learning, I've seen you consistently log in from the United States. Now, all of a sudden, you're logging in from Russia, right? This is something that warrants attention, right? Something that the past experiences influence what we're alerting on today, something that just a single log doesn't actually show you. So we're applying that machine learning and then to other pieces of that as well to be able to take things like, all right, given the amount of time you spend on the machine today, right, inside the network today, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., from 10 to 3, from 2 to 4, whatever it is, right, over that total, you've done, right, this clustering analysis, right, the clustering algorithms and all that. Well, here is your sort of bubble of how much data you upload in a given day. And now all of a sudden you're over here, right? Far exceeding the normal amount of data uploaded to a website or sent out via an email and things like that. So really, really interesting use cases, right? And when you think of those really low-level threats, some of the more tricky threats to track, right? I'll take a side tangent a bit here and talk about insider threat. This is something where it's not as easy as saying, okay, somebody logged in from Russia. I want to investigate this. It's somebody it's finding the needle in the needle stacks, right? Imagine Corey went rogue and started pulling down from file shares, right? Imagine Corey started logging in with his credentials and his Fullstack account and started going out to websites and uploading Fullstack data to GitHub. Corey going to GitHub is, normal. That's what he does. It's hard to alert on that, right? Corey logging into Fullstack laptops is nothing, that it's difficult to alert on. And you're looking at more of these advanced threats. Corey is on the network. He has the credentials and he has the power to do this stuff. How do we actually determine whether that's Corey being malicious or Corey just doing his day-to-day activity, right? And that's where you're starting to see, that's why some of these threats, why some of these attackers are in the network so long. Some of these things are very difficult to decipher between Corey actually doing this activity and Corey, being disgruntled and pulling all this data out. So
Sure.
it's a lot of interesting trends that we're starting to see roll with the cybersecurity community.
You never know if I'm going to go rogue. You never know.
Again. It's interesting. There's a topic that us InfoSec geeks love debating these days on Twitter and elsewhere, which is who's a better security analyst, a human or a machine? And Corey, fair warning, I want your opinion on this one too.
Sure,
but Marc, I'd like to get your take on that one.
Sure. I'll say that it will always be the human. We're, at least for now, when a computer can beat a chess champion and a Go champion, right? I have to second guess myself, but at least for the time being, we haven't seen that much deep dive into security, largely because there are so many different questions and so many different ways that people can hack into a network, right? You look at the MITRE attack framework, right? So for those who aren't familiar, the MITRE attack framework has this large list of all the different techniques that attackers can take. And it's huge, right? It's this big matrix of, okay, step one, they're going to try and log into the machine this way. They could do it through USB. They could do it through a phishing campaign, right? They could do it through valid credentials. They can log in this way, that way, and the other way. Then they move on to the next thing. They could take over a process, right? DLL injection. They could run their own process, right? They could reach out to a C2 server. There's so many different moving pieces and so many different ways that these attacks can happen that honestly, if we try to bake it all into security tools, it's actually quite difficult to do, to bake out every single one of those options. We'll always have the need for security analysts to be that investigation, right? The same way detective work, the same way fingerprinting has given us a much more cohesive analysis and much more confident answer of, did this person commit this crime, right? That's sort of the way you can look at security tools of, we're getting much better to the point of fingerprint analysis where you could say, yeah, like you definitely did it. We have the factual evidence to say you did it, right? But we still need the analyst to dig that up, right? We still need the analyst to find the fingerprints. We still need the analyst to know to look for the fingerprints. We're not quite there yet with security tools.
Corey, do you agree with Marc? Are you going to take the other side of that debate?
I'm in a middle ground. I would say that, like, for me, I want to differentiate two terms for our listeners. The first is, like, people often use machine learning and artificial intelligence interchangeably. They're not the same, right? Artificial intelligence is sort of the larger category of, like, machine automation and, like, thoughtful response, if you will. And machine learning is specifically, like, sort of training a computer to react like a human. That's the simplest way I can describe it, right? Like, sort of like, making, if you've noticed when you watch YouTube, it gets better and better at, predicting what the next video you're going to watch is, right? And you'll notice that your up next is very good. I mean, this is how TikTok really just blew up, right? It's very, very, very good at predicting the things that you like. So do I think that security analysts will ever go away because of computers? No, I don't. And I think that, but I do think it would be, I think it would be not smart to push computers away. I think whatever computers can do and whatever automation we can do, we should do. That is my opinion. I think that generally speaking, like, there is always a next level task for us to complete. There is always sort of that overview, as Marc just pointed out, right? Like, yeah, we can automate DNA testing and fingerprinting and things like that. But there's still some high level decision making. And even when that level of decision making gets automated, we'll have the next level to do and the next level to do. And there's always sort of a wider, bigger problem. It really is the coyote and the hare problem, right? Like where like the better that we become at defending, the better attackers get at attacking, and this cycle continues. So I would never be worried about that. But I do think it begs the question of, like, what role does programming and sort of automation, become as part of the security analyst role, or even in the security field, right? Like how are we seeing that change in the need for sort of automation,
Well, all right. Well, let's talk about that, right? When you talk about programming, that's sort of starting to level up your skills. You don't necessarily need to know how to program to be a security analyst. But Marc, what are some career pathways? Let's say you begin your career as a security analyst. Do you move up to become an engineer, an architect? Like, what are some of the different pathways you can take from there?
To be honest, I think, and let me be firsthand experience of that. I think from that security analyst position, the world opens up to you, right? You're the frontline soldier. You've seen how people can attack, right? You've seen the blue side of things. You should have the mentality from the red side of things. And so from that security analyst position, you can really go, in my opinion, anywhere. So I moved up to SIM engineer after that. My next sort of role was actually building the SIM, building the rules that security analysts investigate, right? That's where I moved up to. But the truth is, you can go to like a security researcher position, right? You understand how people use blue team tools. You can now build a better tool for them, right? Come over to a company like Exabeam, right? Move into a professional services position and be able to deploy the SIM, right? Be able to look at the holistic picture and say, okay, here's what we need to do. Here are the logs we need to get, right? Also move up laterally. So you understand the SOC landscape. You know what works, you know what doesn't work. Move into a manager position, right? Run the SOC, build out your playbooks, move up that way, move across into red team even. I would argue if you can defend against it, the same way we talk about if you can attack it, if you know what defenders are looking for, you have a better idea of how to subvert that, right? If you know that, hey, this is the way we're doing it on the blue team side of thing, then maybe we should attack this way. Maybe we should go in through this way. Or I know this is a blind spot for a lot of security work. So to put that into a single sentence, I think the world really opens up to you, right? You're a frontline soldier. You have the experience. You know what to look for in these things. And the world opens up after that point.
And it's also a function of the job market, right? I mean, 85% of the jobs are on blue team, and almost all the entry-level jobs are, as a security analyst, right? So it's a good place to start. And I agree, the world does open up. If you do a tour of duty, let's say, for a year and a half as a security analyst. So let's say you are running a SOC, right? And you now need to hire another security analyst. A seat has just opened up. What are you looking for? What makes a good security analyst?
Yeah, great question. To be honest, I think the best security analyst, something I touched on a little bit before, is asking the right questions. Being able to look at this isolated incident, right? This door that was unlocked, and being able to ask the questions, what else should I look for, right? That is one of the most difficult things, and really what separates the good security analyst from the just average security analyst is are you asking the right questions of what happens next? And that's such a broad topic, because there are so many different ways that attackers can get in, right? There are so many different pathways and questions to ask, right? Okay, well, I said a few things about breaking into this house, right? We should check if the door is unlocked. Did you check the basement? Did you check the upstairs? Did you check the window? Did you even forget to check if there was a ladder outside to the second floor window, right? Some of those questions may seem obvious, but those are the things that you often forget to reiterate, right? And asking those questions of knowing what to look for, because you can ask a million questions. And a million questions will lead you to a million answers and a million different breadcrumbs, a million different rabbit holes to go down. To be honest, it's what makes a good security analyst is having the skill set to ask the right questions, right? Being able to look at that data. And when you get to a point where the data can't help you, now you know this is something that needs to be fixed, right? Now this is where the security industry can grow, right? We can actually look at this, whether you're in an enterprise environment and you say, man, I need to check the database logs. I didn't even think to check the database logs. Maybe Corey started pulling some of this stuff off the database, right? Did I even think to check the database logs? Well, if we don't have those, now we see a blind spot in our network. Now this is something I know I can fix and really come full circle that way. So it's asking the right questions, having that security mindset that we talked about.
Oh yeah, Marc. So you're making me think here. I think one really good distinction is and something that we try to teach here too is that look, the tools in the industry change all the time, all the time. Like every year there is a new cool tool, shiny new tool on the block that is the best sim, the best way to do X, the best way to find out Y. But asking those good questions, that thought process, that paradigm of what attackers do and how defenders defend, what is our process, that doesn't really change that often. Those big paradigm changes don't really happen. They do occasionally, right? But they're very they're far and few between. And so learning how to ask those good questions, I can't agree more, is like the most important thing here. I think we have one more big question that I want to ask before we get into our last segment, which is what would be your closing advice for somebody who's looking to become a security analyst? What would be some tips that you would give them as they start wanting to march down this path and get into this industry?
Yeah, I'll start holistically and say passion, right? I know it's something that you can't necessarily go out and open up a new browser and log into something new and continue, but I would argue that it actually is staying passionate, right? So to be honest, I didn't get to where I was because I knew everything right off the bat, right? I was learning this as I went along. I was asking myself these questions, right? Can this machine actually connect to this one if it's on the same subnet, or does it have to route through here, right? How does a VPN logging in actually get you into the internal network, right? And asking myself these questions, constantly learning and relearning this stuff to make sure I knew that I knew every piece of that, right? Exactly what was going on. So staying passionate, staying hungry. If you're on the video now, open up a new tab and start learning some new tools, right? Start learning, open up the MITRE attack framework and look at those techniques and see what else is there, right? But as far as actually putting rubber to the road, you can put passion on a resume, but it doesn't, it won't get through that HR filter. I'll say a boot camp like this one, right? The skills that I learned are not things that translate to a 4-year degree, right? There's very few cybersecurity degrees, undergraduate degrees. There are some, they're starting to pop up, but there's very few of them. And to be honest, the skill set that you're learning mirrors a lot of the curriculum that we're doing here at Fullstack. And getting that skill set, looking up the information, getting onto a program just to have a foundation to build on top of, right? And then taking that into the next phase, which is security certifications, right? So Security Plus. If you have no experience with security at all, crack open a Security Plus book, right? That's probably your first big foot to get that foundation. Part of what's tricky of doing this day to day is again, more breadcrumbs, right? Every breadcrumb will lead you to a new acronym: DNS, HTTP, right? VPN. And if you do that in silo, you'll miss the bigger picture. So being able to find this stuff, read these books, understand the larger picture, right? And then moving into security certifications and things like that, continue learning as you go on.
I think that the first one you mentioned, passion, is so important. I couldn't agree with that more. Sometimes we hear people want to go into cybersecurity because they can make a lot of money. And if that's your primary motivation, that's not a recipe for success. That should be a side benefit. That's a function of the talent shortage. That's why people get paid well in this field. But the reason they should go into this field is because they love geeking out on this stuff. They have fun. They watch DEF CON talks on YouTube just for fun, right? If you're passionate about it, then you'll have the energy to learn, to keep up the pace of learning, to learn these new tools and go in every day. But passion, if there's one thing, I think passion is the most important thing you need as a security analyst, or really anyone in cyber.
Sorry, if I could just butt in, I think it's on that point to the people that are watching, if they don't know if they have that passion or not. I found something really interesting. I was watching online streams of somebody who was doing pinball machines, right? And he was taking pinball machines, taking them apart, but he knew everything about these pinball machines. He was geeking out. He's like, "Oh, the spring they used is actually made here, and this has a X pound per weight spring, and the actuation energy of the buttons, right? Whether it be pinball machines, whether it be video games, right? Breaking out of video games, whatever it is, that sort of passion is exactly mirrors very well and translates very well into cybersecurity."
Notice that both Marks, the Mark squared, if you will, are both, not saying that you need to know everything. And I think that's really important to our listeners is like, I think that, to be honest with you, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, I always like to say that, you should confidently and proudly say, I don't know, when you don't know something. You should never, and that's okay. And I think that the growth that you can have, the passion, the confidence that you need going into an interview or when you're trying to break into this industry is knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. And that landscape is what will make you a good security analyst who can ask a lot of good questions, as Mark has told us is very important today.
Right, to be able to ask those questions.
Yeah, ask those questions.
Mark, we could talk to you for hours about security analyst stuff. Alas, we are going to have to let you go at some point. But before we do,
is it that time, Mark? It
is that time.
Wow.
It is that time.
What
time is it, Corey?
Show and tell.
Show and tell.
Right. Yeah, it's our segment. That's like we still need a background, like click or sound or something. So
a little noise, a little jingle or something.
Yeah,
that's right, Corey. We must have some minions we can put on the case to have a sound effect.
I'm on it. I'm just kidding. Mark, your camera, by the way, went out.
Yeah. Start cam. Okay, so let's get into it. Mark.
Yeah, let me share my screen here. Let's see. So hang on just a second here. I have to let. Hang on 1 second. Actually, given that I need to restart Chrome, let me do this way. I'll see if I can pull this up here. And I wanted to show you guys something that was actually really cool. So when I started in my SOC, one of the things that I saw was we needed a way to be able to do, and I'll just share my screen here. I'll flip it over again because Chrome is asking me for the permissions. But one of the things that we desperately needed was we were doing this consistent investigation. Every time we saw an IP address, every time we saw a domain, we were always looking at the same thing here, right? We always had to do the same sets of the same steps for response. And naturally, I was tired of doing this, right? There's a fair amount of, industry recognition that the best engineers are the ones who are lazy because they'll build a tool that will do everything for them. And so naturally, when I was at this company, one of the first things I did was actually built this security analyst tool, right? So this was my first version of a SOAR tool, right? And as you can see, chances are the API keys don't work anymore. Chances are this was before I knew how to handle asynchronous requests in JavaScript. And so you would type in a domain. It was easy as this. You type in a domain like CNN.com, right? You can submit that, and then you'll get all the information that you need as an analyst, right? So the category, the site description, the full HTTP header response, the who is information. And so all of these different scripts that were run that I did on the SOAR tool. And sure enough, I mentioned and I showed it to you guys here today because it was something that actually became a billion-dollar industry, right? Security companies are now building SOAR tools, and something that I certainly wish I capitalized on when it happened. But the reason I show this as well is because as you get on the job, we're making this. I won't say we're making it up, but we're all learning as we go. The security industry is learning this stuff as we go. And you'll see opportunities at your network, your company, where you work to be able to build out tools that will help the team. And this will go a really long way.
So when did you build that tool?
This was when I first started my analyst role. So this was years ago. I'd say 6 or 7 years ago at this point. That was when I built it, and that was when again I was doing the analysis. I saw this IP address and I said, we're always going to virus total, right? Some people aren't doing this, some people aren't doing this. Let's just build one place where we can scan this IP address. So that was when I first started my analyst position.
And so this was like a side project you were doing for fun.
Yeah, there were times where I was working overnight in that SOC, and the alerts weren't incredibly high volume, and so I had the time to be able to throw some cartoons on the SOC monitor and be able to build out a tool like this.
That's awesome. I think that's like exactly the passion that we're talking about here, right? Is like just going, and Marc's job wasn't dependent on being able to do this. This was just something that, and I think that he made his life easier. This is like being, delightfully lazy, right? Is like, hey, I'm doing the same thing every time. Is there just a way I can automate this little piece? And I think that that's leveling up your career. I think that's what'll help you also think about going from, security analyst to security engineer or architect. And, when you're sort of, doing these kinds of things, that's how you're going to stand out. Really awesome, Marc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I noticed VirusTotal in there. VirusTotal must have been about 5 minutes old by the time you built that, right? So you were obviously playing around with like the latest and greatest.
Yeah, it was a much different time where the API documentation was coming along, but there's still a little to be desired. So,
right.
Yeah, definitely stuff that I was just like, could I get a screenshot of a website without actually going to it? There's a website that does that. Let me tap into its API. Mm-hmm. It was just total like, wouldn't it be cool if it did this? And I just tapped on features and more features.
Right.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Marc, thank you so much for joining Corey and me today and geeking out a little bit. I know you got to get back to Exabeam and that your new 28 students. I think you just had a new cohort.
New class, yeah,
big cohort, but excited to be part of it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
as always.
Thanks for having me, Marc.
Absolutely, thanks, Marc.
Great.
All right. Okay, so Corey, that's a wrap on today's episode.
Yeah, it was great. I think I had a good time. Hopefully you had fun too. It was, I felt like we had some really productive conversations, and Marc didn't know how to build all those things when he was building it, right? He was curious. He was excited. He was passionate, and that's what drove him. And so for those of you who are listening, who are like, this stuff excites me, that's your itch. That's what you need. Everything else will come with time, with the right information, with the right order, with the right sort of way of digesting things. You're going to be okay, and you can be that. But let that passion be your motivation. That'd be my biggest takeaway from today. And this is really cool because we got to see things. We talked to a CISO. Now we're talking to somebody who started, obviously as an analyst, and where most people start. And I think that was really cool to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people are now fired up, they know what a security analyst is, and they want to try and become one, and they want to do their technical training. Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp is one path to do your training. Corey, if people want,
biased?
I am. Yes, I am 100% biased. Disclaimer up on screen. Corey, if people want to learn more about Fullstack Cyber Bootcamp, where can they go?
You can go to cyber.fullstackacademy.com to find out more. We have some really awesome free introductory classes. We have a fun hacking workshop that we do pretty much monthly at this point. And we have also an on-ramp if you're interested in learning a little bit about Linux. So some really cool stuff that you can find on cyber.fullstackacademy.com.
cyber.fullstackacademy.com. Okay, everybody. If you want to connect with me on Twitter, I'm at Digitize My Life, and my DMs are open. Corey, where can people find you on Twitter?
I am at Instructor Corey, Corey. And that's my Twitter. So I think that's a wrap for today. I think that's all the big things to cover. And so we will see you next time on Breaking Into Cybersecurity. See you then.
All right.